What is up, everybody? Welcome back to DFS MVP, the 8th season, episode 219. We are back with the DraftKings first look. DraftKings dropped salary last week. As you guys know, if you listened before, I'm your host, TJ Hernandez, the director of DFS at 4for4.com. But as to not bury the lead, the most important story of the offseason, we have a new co-host at DFS MVP, Mr. John Daigle. If you are have been living under a rock, or you are new to the NFL or fantasy landscape and you don't know who John Daigle is, Daigle, tell the listeners a little bit about your background, both football, fantasy, DFS.
A lot. I paused because I don't even know where would I even begin with my life story and how I got here. But to keep it simple, while I was adopted, let's start there, Fort Worth, Texas. But no, to keep it simple for everyone, came from NBC Sports Edge, still very good friends with everyone over there. But nonetheless, we have started a new chapter, and here we are at 4for4 Football. 8 seasons is strong. And I am taking this job with you this season so seriously that for the first time in literally years, I looked at week one pricing before 48 hours prior to week one because I don't like, admittedly, to create biases this early. I don't want to be stuck on someone and have that opinion sneak up on me. But this is good because that means we get to do it on behalf of everyone. I'm not even saying everyone should go look at all the rest of week one pricing. They should look at your article on the site. They should listen to this podcast as we try to get ready for game theory and get back in the mindset of what last year we discovered became the hardest year ever for DFS. But more importantly, I think, in my opinion, legitimately the most fun because it was 2 games within a game. And it took being locked in all week long, and that's what we're going to be this year. I'm even taking on, not announced yet, I guess I'll say it, I'm taking on our DraftKings top plays article, which I will be looking at both from a cash game, but more importantly, tournament perspective, and we'll talk about what kinds of tournaments we prefer playing and what everyone else should play at the end of the show. And then also we'll have someone else take on FanDuel, and we'll discuss plays throughout the week. So, yeah, we're already just getting to the mindset here at 4for4.
Yeah, man, it's exciting. And I mean, admittedly, the first look shows, the first look article, we're building excitement for the DFS season. Like, our opinions will and should change leading up to week one. And there's just still a ton of information to learn. We haven't even had our first preseason game yet. But as you mentioned, the reason we start this podcast so early in the year, which, I mean, it's not early to us. We've been doing NFL since we never stopped. But this is pretty early for DFS. And because if you are new to DFS MVP, the thing that has always separated us from other podcasts is we're not just giving you a list of plays. We're diving into theory. We're trying to teach you how to play, not who to play. So every single week, in the preseason, we'll be covering a general theory segment, whether it be bankroll management, game selection, lineup building, and it's topics that we have covered in the past on this show. So if you are new or you want to get caught up on some of it, either check out our YouTube playlist that has a bunch of theory segments from years past, or go to the DFS Strategy Hub and check that out. But we're excited to get the season started. Pretty soon, we will have a full list of the official in-season plans, as John alluded to, but we're still hammering out some things there. Before we get into the first look today, just want to remind everybody that today's show is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. You can get a free DFS subscription if you deposit at least $10 at Underdog Fantasy using the promo code 4for4. You'll also get a deposit bonus match up to $100. You must be a new Underdog user, so click on that link in the description below the video. But let's jump into it. Again, we're just going to look at this really quickly, kind of do a faux DFS MVP podcast where we go position by position, but just kind of look at what caught our eye. Again, these aren't our cemented in picks or anything. But what jumped out, actually, before we get into the positions, just anything jump out to you in general looking at DraftKings? I didn't see anything change. Like the salary ceilings and floors look almost identical to last year. If nothing jumps out to you, is there anything you do different for week one DFS compared to the other weeks?
Not really. Pricing
Yeah.
is terrible. It's awful. It's going to lead to the same chalky plays. I feel like this was the case in week 1 last year. I tried to jot down the journal, like the story of every single week. And last year, what it was, as will be the case this year again, is just pivoting to similarly like priced players in Kadarius Toney's range, for instance, Michael Pittman's range, things of that nature, because these guys are going to get steamed heavily. You can literally, like you can every week with FanDuel, essentially on DraftKings, I can already tell you, you can do whatever the hell you want. Literally, just make your own lineup, you make your fantasy lineup, because it, in terms of like what you can actually fit, doesn't matter at all. You can fit everybody.
Yeah, the two big things that happen with the thing that is bad about salaries coming out this early is that, one, there's camp battles, right? So we're going to get starters that are priced as backups. So that's going to lead to like basic free scores. And then injuries are going to happen. So you're going to get surprise starters from that as well. So you almost always get a couple free squares in week 1, and it leads to kind of a free for all. I've said for the past couple of years, I don't think they'll ever do this just because they want money locked up as little as possible. I think it would be fun if one of the sites did a tournament where like salary lineups lock like before the Hall of Fame game. So salaries come out last week, you got to make lineups right now, and then they lock. Like that would be, obviously they don't want to
like
lock up money for a month.
Best ball.
Yeah. But they won't do it. But maybe if you guys need if a new startup site needs a guy for some research and development, some ideas, holler at your boy.
I like the idea.
Yeah. Let's talk about quarterbacks real quick. Who jumped up at you at quarterback on your first look?
It's actually Daniel Jones at the stone minimum. Well, not stone minimum, but 5K essentially.
Yeah.
Even like the next closest player in his range, Tyler Huntley, is also 5,000. A backup quarterback is the same price as Daniel Jones. I wrote this in my Giants team preview, but I will be trying, I know for a fact, to get ahead of it in week 1. I can already tell you Daniel Jones will probably be in every single cash game article in week 1. I can already see it playing out, since not just looking at what Brian Daigle brings to the Giants, but let's start with the defensive side of the ball, and that losing Pro Bowler James Bradbury and their secondary, also safety Logan Ryan. Like that literally vacates 31 combined starts and 150 tackles for this secondary that can easily be argued as the worst in the entire league. That's amazing for the Giants passing attack all year long. Why I believe Daniel Jones in season long will actually be a top 15 quarterback. But more importantly, with no tight ends to be afraid of. Like they don't have competitive NFL tight ends. Also, Brian Daigle, of course, last year with the Bills, schemed the fewest sets of multi-tight end packages. Like we're expecting them to go 4 and 5 deep at wide receiver, with Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton rounding out the other 3. Wan'Dale Robinson, of course, in camp, starting in 3 wide sets. So I expect them to be a totally different offense. I expect them to have to be passing a lot because their defense is so bad. And I think it starts here in week 1. So I'm actually going to get ahead on Daniel Jones and Giants offense. Reminder also, Josh Allen's last 7 starts last year, when he averaged an increased 9.7 carries per game. Like 70% of those carries were design runs. They weren't scrambles, because Daigle knew what it took to like actually move the chains and move the offense when defenses play more too high safety. Like I think we're going to see Daniel Jones schemed a lot to run the ball. And so we have a high floor from week 1 at cheap.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And first of all, you glossed over it super quick. If you guys were listening, he mentioned his team previews there. Those things are bangers right now on the site. Team previews going up for every single team. I think you're through 18 or 19 teams right now.
Happily, more important, they're also like, this is what's slowing them down. They're getting updated because we're getting so many injuries right now.
Dude.
So like literally Tim Patrick injury.
Pouring out for Tim Patrick. That's my guy.
That sucks. But the Tim Patrick injury, the James Washington injury, like all of these things are already updated in the team preview. Click on the link of the site, and then there's actually like lettering in bold red that tells you when the last date is. I updated it, so they're all there for everyone.
Yeah, and one thing you mentioned about getting out ahead of the Giants, going back to my initial question, one thing that I do like to do in week 1 and early in the season, and where I do think guys like us can have an advantage that have been drafting since, the NFL draft, we've been drafting teams, we get like a really good read on who we think breakout players are going to be. So whether it be a rookie or a team, we can get these guys on the cheap because we've been doing our homework all year, right? We're not preparing a couple days before week 1. We've been preparing since the Super Bowl ended. So we have guys that we think can really pop. And if they haven't yet, obviously they're going to be cheaper on DFS sites. A player that popped to me is Derek Carr. There's only we already have lines up for games on DraftKings or on any sportsbook that you bet on. So right now there's 2 games with over-unders above 50. One of those is the Raiders and the Chargers. All of the quarterbacks in those games are priced up except for Derek Carr. Derek Carr is one of 3 quarterbacks on a team with a 24 point or higher implied point total that's priced under 6K. So if you're just looking to attack that game, I think that's going to be a fun one to attack. I mean, we want the rushing on these sites. Obviously, it's very, very important. But since you do get the 300-yard bonus, rushing is negated a little bit on DraftKings compared to FanDuel, especially in tournaments. Like you're looking for those 300-yard, 4-touchdown games. So that looks like it could be a shootout as long as everybody stays healthy through camp. So Derek Carr at sub K is going to be a nice one for me there, I think.
It'll be interesting given that he's only, quote unquote, only 900 more than Daniel Jones, who offers a rushing floor. Derek Carr has only averaged 1 point per game extra rushing since he underwent fibula surgery in 2017. So we have like a long resume that says he does not run the ball. Thus his floor is limited. So it's just, I think it'll actually be a great pivot point from Daniel Jones, knowing that that's how probably everyone will play it, to squeeze other expensive players in.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, it's funny because I just talked about like us looking at teams all year and stuff. And Raiders are one of the teams I've kind of been out on best ball just because I think they're just priced super weird. I just don't like it. But I like that. I like that Derek Carr in week 1 as of now. Running backs. Who you got a guy that we've been talking about a lot this offseason?
And staying with the theme to warm my own brain up 1 month out of having to do this every single day of my life. I know the person you'll talk about is going to be the heaviest rostered running back in DFS week 1 because as you were going to argue, I haven't even seen your notes yet. I know for a fact you're going to argue he's too cheap. Having said that person at 8,500 is so cheap, we can scroll down slightly and instead play Alvin Kamara at 7,600 because even though when Mark Ingram was traded for mid-year, Kamara averaged a lower share of backfield touches, he still handled a career high in touches per game. And he gets a very poor Falcons defense in week 1. I think the Saints offense is going to be really fun this year. I akin them to Miami and that I don't know what's going to happen and they're very volatile. But remember, like the Jameis Winston we saw in his last 2 starts prior to injury that was allowed to throw 36 times per game and had the 4th highest rate of throws, 20 plus yards downfield, was completely different than the one that was actually 24th in deep throws the month leading up to those last 2 starts. And so like, I think with Sean Payton no longer there, the lid is just going to be like taken off the jar and they're just going to tell Winston to be himself. Like, yes, lead the league in turnovers, but we need you also to lead the league in passing yards because we need juice in this offense that gave you multiple deep threats this offseason. So yeah, I think Kamara is going to be an amazing pivot play in week 1.
Yeah, I like that. I just like the Saints a lot. Going into the season and in week 1, I think.
And Paulson's projections are also very high on Winston too.
Yeah, I like that call a lot. You mentioned the guy I'm going to talk about, priced up at 8,500, is Christian McCaffrey. And this is like it's kind of hard to. We know when players are grossly mispriced, it's hard to kind of dig through like very nuanced pricing and decide if they're underpriced or overpriced. What we do know about Christian McCaffrey is when he is right, he's a 9,500 10K player on DraftKings. So if Christian McCaffrey is right, if he's a Christian McCaffrey that's getting 10 targets and 15 rushes and giving you 27 points, he is underpriced, right? So on a player like that, I'm going to take the bet that like I'm not predicting injuries. He's CMC going into week 1. There's a chance that this is the cheapest you're going to get him all season. I have a very strong feeling that when John Paulson does release week 1 projections that he will be at the top of our value report on 4for4 just because I know how we're going to project him. And I know that salary has climbed really above 10K before on DraftKings. So I'm excited about that play a lot. He like you said, he'll probably be one of, if not the most popular player on the slate, but it's going to be really easy to get him because, as you mentioned earlier, someone's going to get hurt in training camp. We're going to have these free squares. So CMC, we're going to get to play him at sub 9K, and we don't ever get to do that. Wide receiver. No, go ahead.
I would say I compare it to last year, the first 8 weeks, how I was a losing player because I was still learning how to handle Cooper Kupp and salaries. I did not become a winning player literally until the second half of the season and understanding what was happening in the new evolved game of DFS. And Christian McCaffrey, as you said, like Cooper Kupp until he became 10K. Until Christian McCaffrey becomes 10K, you literally play him every single week. Simply put, he's played 8 full games under Matt Rule the past 2 years. And in those 8 games, he's averaged 17.5 carries, 7 targets, a 20% target share, and handled 85% of Carolina's running back touches inside the 10-yard line. Lock him in every single week.
Yeah, I love that a lot. We talked for a second about guys that going into the season that we're just really excited about that we think could break out. And this isn't a breakout player, you're a wide receiver, but it is a player that like we think can be like a top 4 or 5 wide receiver maybe if things break right for him. So what wide receiver do you think is crazy underpriced in week 1?
What I love about Michael Pittman is that we've seen the ceiling. When Carson Wentz was a serviceable NFL quarterback through week 9 last year, Michael Pittman averaged an increased 9.2 yards per target, scored 5 touchdowns and averaged 21 fantasy points per game, and was the wide receiver 7 overall in fantasy through week 9. We forget that because when Carson Wentz went back to being a third-string quarterback in the league to close the year from week 10 on, Pittman only scored once, averaged merely 11.2 fantasy points per game, and was the wide receiver 30 from that point forward in the second half of the year. So we've seen he has a ceiling with confident quarterback play, and now we get veteran Matt Ryan playing behind the best offensive line of his career. Remember last year, the Falcons actually allowed a league high in pressure rate. Now we get Ryan behind the Colts offensive line. All these scores don't necessarily have to go to Jonathan Taylor again. Like he doesn't necessarily have to lead the league in carries inside the 5, 10, and 20. Like we now with a competent quarterback who doesn't turn the ball over, we can lean on Matt Ryan and more importantly, wide receiver 1 Michael Pittman. So if you look at my best ball tiers, I have Michael Pittman as the wide receiver 10 overall, and I think 5,500 is far too cheap for a player that in a couple of weeks we could probably argue will be over 7K.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Again, I'm getting way ahead of myself here, but assuming everything stays the same as we have it now and there's no injuries, as of now, the Colts are the biggest favorite in week 1. They're favored by 8. Jonathan Taylor, along with Christian McCaffrey. People are going to be trying to get JT into their lineups because they're just in an absolute smash spot. So if we're thinking ahead to tournament theory and kind of getting our brains back to that mindset, then Pittman's probably going to end up being a fantastic leverage play off of JT going into week 1. I just wrote down the Chiefs wide receivers. We are going into the season. We don't know what that target totem pole is going to look like. I think it should be Juju Smith-Schuster, who is the wide receiver 1. Obviously, Travis Kelce is the favorite to be the leader in targets on that team, but they have a 4-player wide receiver core that is very, very ambiguous. And the reason I bring them up for this conversation is because if you can figure out who is going to be the one that hits, that could be the very big moneymaker in week 1. And it's not going to be very difficult for you to take that gamble because Juju Smith-Schuster is only priced at $5,200. He's the most expensive Chiefs wide receiver. You go all the way down to Sky Moore at $3,800. So we got 4 wide receivers who could possibly lead their wide receiving core in targets, tied to the best quarterback in the league, all with super affordable salaries. So I'm going to be paying very, very close attention to the Chiefs for week 1, trying to figure out how can I get a piece of this Chief offense on the cheap in week 1.
That's the way I've sort of been looking at the Giants receivers too.
Yep.
But to your point, the Chiefs wideouts, it's going to be a great opportunity to just play 1, if not 2, of the least rostered ones.
Yeah, 100%.
Knowing we don't know the situation. And again, preseason usage, camp notes, they may shine the light over the next month of the season, showing us that actually Juju is going to be an every down player, etc. But if we enter with still an ambiguous situation, yes, we just take advantage of the lower rostered individuals and try to get a piece of the Chiefs offense.
And on the flip side, if we get some really strong indicators in preseason, like just for example, say it is Juju, and then we're getting, for whatever reason, when ownership projections come out, we think we are very confident he's going to be the leader in targets, and we're getting like a 10% Juju, then you could just smash that too, right? If you're not getting one of them that's crazy high rostered. So that situation is going to offer a ton of opportunity. Probably, unless one just like blows the field away in terms of his teammates, probably all season that's going to be a really fruitful situation.
My biggest win last year was when I took down the FanDuel Oh gosh, which one was it? I don't know. One of the ones I played. It's the mid to high stakes single entries, and it was the Packers Ravens game, if you recall, when Tyler Huntley came in late, or Tyler Huntley got the start. But it's my favorite. I mention it only because it's my favorite correlation. And I had Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams both high rostered. Devontae Adams like 40%, Aaron Rodgers 20%. But then you tack on literally 1% Marquez Valdes-Scantling because you need a double stack. So you add that extra ancillary player that goes overlooked. That's kind of what we can probably do with the Chiefs in week 1, if we remember this in our mental notes a month from now, is to play Juju and Mahomes. Then also, like, if Sky Moore is supposedly on the bench, you take 1% Sky Moore over 13% Marquez Valdes-Scantling for the volatility every single time.
Yeah, I love those plays. I'm excited, man. I'm so excited to get this thing started.
Yeah, actually, I came in fretting talking about this, and now like I'm already excited again for the game theory of it all.
I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this play at tight end, someone that stood out to you, because he's going to be playing with a backup quarterback. So holler at me about this guy.
So for my tight end, I go looking for cheap. Let's start there. And I have David Njoku written down because, like his ADP right now, like how people are, in my opinion, incorrectly treating him as tight end 16, tight end 17, as opposed to a low end tight end 1 who could actually break out. Like, we're taking Irv Smith, who is now injured, but also like coming off a serious injury last year, whenever there's literally a 26-year-old breakout explosive tight end waiting to potentially happen. But in week 1, for me, it just comes down to the scheme for Kevin Stefanski and the fact that he's actually targeted his tight ends at top 4 rates the past 2 seasons. The Jacoby Brissett was a top 5 quarterback in his starts, targeting tight ends as well. And so, although I don't like to carry the play calling over, Brissett played in a different scheme. I understand that last year. We also know Brissett is a check down machine. Like, he averaged 5.6 yards per attempt, even from a clean pocket. And the guy underneath will definitely be David Njoku. And we know he has the explosiveness to get upfield. No one's going to believe in it. No one's going to want to play him, despite being like one of the most explosive tight ends who could literally win the slate himself if everything goes right on 7 to 10 targets. And so, like, the fact that no one's going to be on him, even as I talk about it, I know no one's going to be on him. That's kind of what I want to get ahead of, honestly.
It's actually funny you brought up Joku, because when we were prepping for the show, I was just kind of playing around with, like, I looked at CMC and I was like, oh, they're playing the Browns, like, and I thought about Deshaun Watson being suspended. I was like, oh, I wonder if they mispriced Brissett, but Brissett's actually priced above of higher than Daniel Jones. So it's like, again, going back to your Daniel Jones, like, they have backup quarterbacks priced higher than Daniel Jones on DraftKings right now. So that's it's wild.
That makes sense. Also, very quickly, like, everyone's going to look at Njoku's box scores from last year and notice, like, basically, when Baker Mayfield got injured from week 6 on, David Njoku doesn't go over 40 yards in any game again. Also, you could argue, though, it's because Baker Mayfield got injured, because until that point, in like the games he performed best was week 1 when he had 75 yards and week 5 when he had 140 and a touchdown. And those were, of course, when Baker Mayfield was healthy. So, like, even a healthy quarterback, as long as he's feeding him targets, I do think Njoku can perform well.
Yeah, and we're super high on Njoku in general at 444. JP has been very bullish on him all season, and it's a player that I need to start drafting more. But that sub 4K tight end is always something I'm looking to find on DraftKings. This guy isn't sub 4K, but he's very reasonably priced. Zach Ertz. Cardinals are playing the Chiefs. I was talking about the Chiefs wide receiver core. If people want to pay up at tight end on DraftKings, Kelsey's probably going to be pretty popular, just because that game is projected to go over 50 points. The spread in that game is only 3. The Cardinals are coming into the season with DeAndre Hopkins suspended, with a new number 1 wide receiver in Hopkins' place for now, in Marquise Brown. So Ertz is a guy that is going to come in, probably going to project very, very well in terms of target volume, at least for week 1 and at least for those first 6 weeks. And you're going to be able to pivot off of Kelsey to get to Ertz. You're going to be able to stack him with Kyler Murray if you want. So sub 4,500 price tag in that game, I think, is going to be really intriguing for Ertz.
Reminder that Ertz ran a route on 84% of Cardinals dropbacks had a 20.5% target share, 8.5 targets per game, and his 8 starts he made without Hopkins last year, compared to just a 14% target share and route on 70% of dropbacks and 4.5 targets per game with Hopkins. Immense dip in opportunity. And I understand they added Marquise Brown, but we can very easily argue as well that Marquise Brown does not overlap with Ertz in the slightest.
I'm excited. Ertz is weird because like I'm super trepidatious about him in best ball because I feel like when Newt comes back, it could get pretty ugly. But week 1 in that game, I'm all over it.
Agree, and I'm okay because of that reason. I'm also been drafting Ertz with some tight end 3 builds because even if like the tight end 3 is Taysom Hill,
that makes sense.
Even though I have some Taysom Hill's tight end 2 builds as well, because you don't really. Like the range Ertz is going, it's not like he's being overdrafted. Like he falls off a cliff. Everyone waits on Hawkinson, we know. Then everyone waits on Goddard, we know. And then Ertz goes like after, and then you have a choice to get Alberto or Njoku after that, much later.
I'm glad you brought up Taysom Hill. DraftKings, get it together and make Taysom Hill a tight end. They still have him listed as a quarterback, and it's annoying.
He's even a tight end on Sleeper.
It's annoying, and I drafted him on accident in a best ball the other day on DK because I didn't even realize it. And oh my god,
DK, he's a quarterback.
I was drafting him as So fix it, DK. Come on, I like you guys. Defense. I mean, Washington is favored by 4 in their 2,500. Like I'm just looking at the cheapest favorite every single week, and or even like a cheap small underdog. I don't even need to say anything else. They're favored by 4. There's 2,500.
This is when I drew a line on you and didn't write.
Yeah, you don't. I don't care. You don't got to write.
But I will. Some quick theory though. Just remember that everyone goes to the bottom and clicks the bottom. So even like our good friend Jonathan Bells, one of the early days of DFS even, he said he would do was, now we've gotten a little bit sharper about pricing for defenses, so you can't just do this, but literally it is better, given the volatility of defense, to blind click the price, whatever defense is priced literally 100 more than the lowest price defense, because it's going to come in 20% less rostered, and that advantage in ownership is so much better than actually playing the 30% over roster defense.
If you're playing chalk defense, you're drawing dead damn near.
I also think last year we noticed it became an advantage to leave some left over for defense because no one pays up for defense anymore, and we may be at the height of good quarterback play, top heavy quarterback play, but we also may be at the height of the worst quarterbacks we've ever seen in the league, honestly. And so whenever Ian Book plays Monday night, like you have to start that defense. Whenever Jacoby Brissett starts, sometimes if it's a strong defense, you have to start him. Like that's kind of the way it worked out. So like, honestly, you may be better off strategically also paying up for defense this year. Just keep in mind.
Yeah, and this is less prevalent on DraftKings, but stack your defense too. Like play your defense with a running back.
Absolutely.
Even play your defense just like a random skill position player. Just because like if a game is a blowout, if they get crazy good game script, the defense probably has a really good game, right? Even if all the scoring comes on the offensive side, the defense has probably put him in a really good position. So like defense and any offensive player is a super underrated stack that people just don't use enough. One thing that I thought would be fun to do, again, we're just kind of as our first look, just going through the games. I didn't see, DraftKings didn't post anything like crazy in terms of any new contests or different contests from last year. There are 3 different ways to win $1 million in week 1. There's 3 different millionaire contests. I think it's a $5, $100, and then a $4,444. Maybe we should all play that for the 4for4 branding and try to win it. But they do have 13 contests with a prize pool of at least $250,000. So NFL's king. The contest offering at DK is always crazy, at least in terms of the volume of contests. Before we just get into any contest that stood out to you, just DK specifically, what tournaments do you, or just games, it doesn't even have to be tournaments, do you typically attack, and how do you kind of formulate your DraftKings specific game selection process?
I would just remind everyone to know what you want to do. Like there is nothing wrong. There is no stature or bankroll shaming. Like literally just know, do you want to play $3 or $1 even and go for gold, go for broke and try to win like a $5,000, $50,000 prize pool? Or would you prefer to play that $1 in like a $200 tournament and come away with whatever it might be, $300 to $500? So that's still winning. And so like, as long as you understand what you want to do, then that will definitely make you a better player, because those lineups will look completely different. The same lineups I play in like a Wildcat, the 333, 150 max, or even like one of my favorites became the $750 single entry. I think there are only like 250 people in it, but like that's great stakes for 200 people single entry. I play single entry, of course. I've said this on past shows, but again, just in case people are catching up, I like to make decisions of single entry, especially mid to high stakes, because more mistakes are allowed. So that is already good. Whereas the Millie Maker, you have to be literally perfect. If a player scores 2 touchdowns or even 1 touchdown, it's a rookie. You have to randomly be on that player. But I like to make the decisions single entry because human beings suck at making decisions. People are so scared in life to make decisions, even about their own life, even if it means they get to better their life. And I take that into DFS and I say, okay, like if you can't make decisions, then I actually love making them. And I bet I can make better decisions you in this tournament. And so that's the way I play. And again, those actually still pay out big as well. So it just depends what you want to do. Just know that, because again, it'll lead you to completely different lineups and not having to actually go so low owned or so contrarian.
Yeah. You mentioned understanding what you want to get out of DFS, and going back to what I mentioned earlier, we have the strategy hub on 4for4, and there is a whole series of articles that I have on there on game selection and bankroll management. I think it's 3 different articles. I can't remember. I wrote it like 2 or 3 years ago. And I mean, the first article doesn't even talk about selecting games. It just talks about laying out your goals. Like, what do you want to get out of this game? Because if you don't know that, you're going to go into the DraftKings lobby. You're going to see these big prize points. You're just going to start entering games, right? You're like, oh, I have $100. I don't know what to play. So you got to go through these. You really, if you want to be a winning DFS player, I think selecting, and not even like the most profitable games. Obviously, there's lots of ways to do that. We'll probably have a whole podcast on that at some point. But just smartly picking the games based on what you want to get out of DFS. And I'm like you. I try play not like nosebleed stakes, but higher, like mid to high stakes, the smallest field possible. So I do give up in terms of the game structure, the like flat payout structures. Since I'm choosing to look for smaller fields, like I just don't have the options in terms of somebody that is like playing the $5 level. Like you can choose a flat payout structure, you can choose an upside. I'm looking for smallest fields possible, like small field with some upside. So like you said, those single entry 500, those single entry, I think there's a 777 for week 1. That's a really good structure. So those are the type of games I'm looking at. Yeah, but for the average player, like there's a lot of really good games. Like cut me off if there's any other games you want to throw in here, but I'll just like at every different price point. There's a couple games I highlighted where like they are flat payout structures, so you can just take your $1 and throw it into the like whatever it is, the daily dollar, or like one of those huge. What's another really big one that they have at this small stakes? Like trying to turn $1 into $50,000. You're basically playing the millionaire, right? You need to beat 200,000 people, but if you want like good structures, you can find them. So the Pylon is a $3 single entry game. Less than 4,000 people. It's only $1,000 to first, but it pays out 26% of the field. It's super flat payout structure. If you're a little higher in stakes, the Fair Catch is a $12 single entry. Less than 2,500 entrants. You can turn your $12 into $2,500. You don't have to beat 50,000 entries. The Blind Side is a $27 tournament. That's a $100,000 prize pool. You can turn your $27,000 into $10K. This is a really good mix of upside and a good structure. It is 4,300 entries, which is pretty big for my taste, but the structure is very flat. And then if you're like looking for that mix of upside and like flat-ish payout structures, the $75 and the $100 buy-in range is amazing. We have a 3 max. It's called the goal line with 600 entries at the $75 buy-in. The end zone is a single entry with the $75 buy-in. Hot route is a $100 buy-in, 13 max, only 444 entries. Again, we have to win that tournament for the branding. And all of those first places are $4,000 or higher. So those are really good. If you're like in that mid-stakes range and you're looking for something smallish with some upside, those contests are amazing.
Compare that just to play devil's advocate here. Like I know a lot of people, and I do think the slant, like if you ask to play the play action, the $3, 200,000 person entry, like, cause that's what a lot of people love playing for that big payout. I would tell you And you have to decide this. Maybe skip out on Starbucks, do whatever you got to do. But I would say skip the $3 play action, go to the $9 slant, because that only has 39,000 entries compared to 200,000, and still it's like 29% goes to the top 10. It's 2x min cash, and so like even bubbling, you'll still double up. I think that's like the better recreational tournament to play as opposed to the $3 one.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, why fire that money at the worst structure? Like, and I
this
think
one bullet in this, in my opinion, is better than similar 3 bullets and the cheapest one. So I would just keep an eye on those type of things as well.
And it's at the $9 level, you're getting a slight break on it actually. But another reason that I encourage people to go higher stakes, smaller field is oftentimes you're moving up to a rake discount as well. This one, it goes from 16 to 15%, which you're probably not noticing in the short run, but like money saved is money earned, right? So that I think that is still important.
Completely agree.
All right, that was our first quick look. Again, like don't hold us to these takes in 4 weeks, but it's fun to look at it. Hopefully, FanDuel pricing will be dropping soon. Again, we'll be coming out every single week with a podcast in the preseason. These will get more theory based as we get closer to the season, but we just wanted to get you guys excited about DFS, get you guys looking at the salaries, excited for the DF everything going on in the DFS world at 4for4. We got the Hall of Fame game on Thursday. If you're watching this live, or you're listening to it as soon as it comes out on Wednesday. So we're gonna have preseason action. We got Tim Talmadge on the article for the preseason game, and Tim and Pat James, who have been doing preseason for us for multiple years, will be in the Discord leading up to kickoff. I'm sure Daigle and I will be in the Discord as well. So we got DFS action this week. Please rate and review the podcast if you're listening to this on whatever podcast provider you are listening to. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. It helps out a ton. Make sure you're checking us out on Twitter. Daigle is at NotJDaigle. I'm at TJ Hernandez. Always check out 4for4 at 4for4 football. We'll talk to you guys next week.